We have an interesting situation.
We can't hear you.
Talk closer to the mic.
Juan,
There we go. We have an interesting situation with Herman Cain moving into a leadership position there in the race. In a direct confrontation with Obama, which would be the better choice for America and Black America? And what about, aren't they trying to do the same thing to Herman Cain that they did to you?
Well, this is really interesting because I've noticed that Herman Cain is now described as a bad apple. Herman Cain is described as someone who has offended black people by the suggestion of brainwashing. The attacks on Herman Cain that come from the far left seem to me to be evidence of how threatened they are by Herman Cain. And I think they're specifically threatened. I think part of your question was how would he do with Black America? I think they're specifically threatened by the fact that Herman Cain is saying, hey, wait a second, how does President Obama perform for Black America? How does he perform for all Americans to that extent? And asking hard political questions that go beyond racial identity and simply saying, well, this is our first Black president, automatically you as a Black person should support it. I think Herman Cain is breaking down that paradigm. So I think to a lot of them, but particularly people who have dominated the thinking on the left in the Black community, Herman Cain is a big, big threat. Remember, Herman Cain can make the case, and this has been touched on, it's very racially sensitive, you know, that he's a Southerner, he comes from Morehouse, he's been through so much of the Black experience that even President Obama can't claim. And so it really is an excitable nerve in terms of the Black community, and people are saying, hey, don't go there. We don't want to do that. We don't want, but believe me, people are talking about it. And if you think about him as a church-going, gospel singer, all the rest, Herman Cain said he thought he could get a third of the Black vote. I think he might be able to. If that's the case, you are really shifting American politics. If you are taking a third of the Democratic vote away, boy, that's a game changer, especially with the changing demographics in the society.
Folks, we've got a microphone over.
I'm sure we'll appreciate it. Very quickly, I watch Fox News, I watch MSNBC, and I watch them so I can get different points of view and opinion. What turns me off on all of those programs is when they'll bring in 2 or 3 guests simultaneously with different points of view, and they wind up yelling and screaming over each other when you can't hear anything. Do the producers think this is good TV?
No, and I gotta tell you something, you're not the only one who feels this way, and it's a struggle, because sometimes you get guests who think that by raising the volume of their voice, they're making a better point. And sometimes it's the people who have the weakest points who feel the need to scream the loudest. But what it does is it turns off the audience. People might say, oh my God, you know, I can't stand this, I can't just screaming and shouting. They don't even do this, they do this, they change, you know, they punch the button. So we know it, it's a problem, and you know, the other thing is people say, why do you guys, who are, especially like when the hosts go on and on, they say, well, didn't you invite the guest in so we could hear what the guest has to say as well? You know? So, you know, these are flaws because it's an interesting thing. People watch in large part, the reason they come to the party is because of the domineering, strong personalities of the host, right? That's what brings people in. But at the same time, and I think the fact that I'm on Fox is evidence of this, people do value other points of view, and they want to see real discussion and debate take place. So it's a balance, but that's the problem. What you've identified is a critical problem that everybody on the executive level, on the producer level, is has extreme concerns about. Appreciation. Questions at all?
We miss you on NPR.
And I miss NPR.
In the year since you were fired by NPR, as you look back and you towed up the debits and credits, the pluses and the minuses, how do you come out with this perspective of at least a year? How do you come out on the effect of your case on the political discourse and on political correctness in the United States?
Well, I'm thinking about this a lot, obviously this week being the 1 year mark. And as I was saying to Glenn, initially, you know, I'm a human being. I was very hurt. I couldn't believe, you know, Glenn mentioned I've written books about the civil rights movement. I celebrate people who are activists, who have made a difference in this world and helped us to be a better country. And the idea that someone was going to label me and my life a bigot at this point, you know, in my life, it's unbelievable to me. I didn't understand it. I felt hurt. People said to me subsequently, well, you're okay. You know, Fox gave you a big contract. You know what's interesting? Men always bring up the money. Women say to me, are you okay? But the thing that I learned very quickly. I had this experience, like the day after this happened, NPR trumpeted it to the world as if they were so proud of the fact that they had gotten rid of this terrible person. And suddenly I was coming out of the hotel room and the newspapers were stacked on the floor in front of the door. And I looked down and there I was, my picture was on the front of the New York Times. And I thought, oh my God, that's obnoxious. And then I kicked it away and there it was, USA Today, and there I was again. And I thought, oh my God, did I kill somebody? What happened? Because I felt it was about me. But a year later, I can tell you, that's exactly wrong. What I found out is that there's so many people, and I think the reason people responded to this, I think the reason the news media responded to this, you know, David Weston at ABC said to me, I can't believe you reached to the point in the country where you can't say how you feel. I think that so many Americans, left and right, you know, from Jon Stewart to Sarah Palin, said, you know what, you can't shut people up, tell them they're not allowed to express their feelings, much less build on those feelings in the course of formulating an argument, a debate, an opinion. That's just not right. So it became this larger issue, and to that extent, a year later then, well, I'm glad if it has helped to break apart this, you know, don't talk, you're limited, you're told to shut up kind of structure that I think is fed by the lobbyists in Washington, perpetuated by the political polarization in Washington that leads us down the road where we don't deal with critical issues ranging from immigration to the debt ceiling, to the budget, to terrorism, that we are all inhibited. We've got to get away from it. I think it's time for us to speak up. And if this episode helps to break apart that awful phenomenon, I'm all for it, and not to that extent. I can't quite say this with full enthusiasm, but I'm glad it happened. Thank you.
About some of the terminology that restricts freedom of speech, you quoted the phrase, if you are with us, you are against us, which I quite agree with. But you know, it's interesting because Bush said almost that kind of phrase when he gave an address to the nation, talking about 111. Do you think this was an attempt to suppress international dissent on 911?
I don't know if it was that, but I think it had the impression of saying to people that dissent and discussion was not being invited, that you had to be clearly with us or against us. Now, in a moment of global terror, I think that this was really a much more nuanced roots to the statement. But the impact of it was as you described, because I think to give him credit, what he was saying was he wasn't going to allow states to sponsor terrorism and then say that they had nothing to do with the terrorist act.
Right.